Okay, let's look into today's contents, which is on supply side policies. Okay, so if you remember in the previous lesson, we say that there are different types of policies. Okay, so remember when we talk about policies, right? It can be divided into demand side and supply sides. So this one, let me just quickly write again. So remember we say that we have demand side policies and also supply side policy. Okay, so in the previous lesson, okay, we talked about the demand side policies, which is about the fiscal. Okay, we talked about the fiscal policy in the previous lesson. Okay, and then the next demand side policy that you will be learning when it comes to the chapters at the back will be monetary policy, which we haven't learned it yet. Okay, and for today's lesson, we are going to look into this one, which is the supply side policy. Okay, so we will look into this one for today's lesson. Okay, so in previous lesson, when we talk about fiscal policy, let me just mention about this before we move on to the new topic. So when we talk about fiscal policy, we had learned that for fiscal policy, it can be divided into expansionary and contractionary fiscal policies, right? So when we talk about fiscal policy, is a policy that's used to influence aggregate demand, the total demand of the economy. So either the government would like to increase the total demand or decrease the total demand. So therefore, that affects them, or that will actually influence them to decide whether they want to go for expansionary or contractionary fiscal policy. Now, there's one more term that we didn't talk about in the previous lesson. It's called discretionary and non-discretionary. So discretionary fiscal policy and non-discretionary fiscal policy. Just some terms on it. So discretionary fiscal policy means that that includes the government intervention. Discretionary, that means you purposely. So that means that government making some changes in terms of the policy itself. So when we talk about fiscal policy, remember we talk about the increase or the decrease of the government spending and the taxation. Remember, these two are the instruments of the fiscal policy that we learned in the previous lesson, right? So therefore, if government were to adjust the government spending, either to increase or to decrease, or to increase the tax or to decrease the tax, as long as there's all this adjustment, we call it as discretionary fiscal policy. So when we talk about expansionary fiscal policy or contractionary fiscal policy, right, that includes the interventions from the government. So we call it as discretionary. Non-discretionary means that it is being built into the system and everything is being controlled by the automatic stabilizers. That means what? Like, for example, in the country, you have the tax rate that's been ongoing right now, and you have the transfer payments. Like, for example, if you're unemployed, you can claim for the unemployment benefits. If you're poor, you can claim for some state benefits. Those have been built into the system. So government does not have to make any intervention anymore. Like, for example, if the country is doing very good, so what happens is a lot of people will be paying taxes based on the current tax rate. So high taxation, okay? And less people claiming for the unemployment benefits. So less transfer payments, less government spending. Vice versa, if the country is not doing good, people not doing well, they do not pay a lot of taxes, so the taxes revenue will go down, but more people will be claiming for transfer payments, so therefore the government spending will be going up. So you can see that the taxation go up and down, and the transfer payment, the claims of transfer payments go up and down, is all based on the situation of the economy, and it's all controlled by the existing tax rate and the transfer payment. So government built all these things into a system, everything is controlled automatically. We call it as non-discretionary fiscal policy. I thought about these two terms because I saw that she put these two terms in supply side policy chapter. So a bit weird, so I just mentioned this in the beginning of the class first. I actually thought I actually showed this in the notes as well. If you look into your notes for the previous lesson, you can see that there is discretionary fiscal policy and non-discretionary fiscal policy as well. Okay, so just some two terms. So in case if you want to write that into your assignments, feel free to. So remember, overall fiscal policies, you can divide into expansionary and contractionary. At the same time, you can also classify whether it's discretionary or non-discretionary. Okay, so that's about fiscal policy. I just want to talk about this before we move on to supply side. Okay, so now we look into supply side policy. So as the word suggests, supply side is to influence the aggregate supply, to influence the total supply in the economy. Okay, so let's have a look into our notes here. So overall supply side, we can say that supply side, okay, is a policy that attempts to influence aggregate supply. That means total supply. Directly with the aim to increase the potential outputs. So when I say potential outputs, I'm referring to the capability of the economy in terms of their production. So it's a long run aggregate supply. So potential outputs, that also refer to our potential capabilities of the economy. Okay, and achieve the macro objective like long-term economic growth, low unemployment, and price stability or low inflation. Okay, so therefore, supply side, the focus is to influence the total supply itself and to increase the potential capabilities. Okay, so what are the instruments of supply side policies? So usually when we talk about like training, education, improvement of human capital, all these are under the categories of supply side. As long as the impact is to influence the total supply, okay, we can call it as supply side policy. And for supply side policy, because we say that it will influence the potential output of the economy, right? So that means what? That means it affects the long run aggregate supply. Now remember one thing that we learned earlier, whatever shift the long run aggregate supply will shift the short run aggregate supply as well. Okay, so therefore usually this one will result in the shift of SRAS and the LRAS. Okay, because whatever shift the long run aggregate supply will shift the short run aggregate supply as well. Okay, so usually that's the impacts for the supply side policy. We are going to draw the graph later on. Okay, now, so we can divide supply side policy into market-oriented free market approach or interventionist approach. Market-oriented approach means that today these are the instruments that rely mainly on the market forces. Again, rely mainly on the market forces, okay, to drive the productivity, to drive the efficiency, and to drive the output level. That means when we talk about free market approach, right, government doesn't do much things. Government just rely on the market forces or rely on the market competition, okay, to encourage the firms, okay, to be able to produce more, to be more productive, or to be more efficient. Okay, so it's more on the market forces. So that reduces the role of government. Like what? So these are some of the examples over here. Okay. One of the example here, as you see, income tax cuts. Now, students always confused. Hey, isn't that last week we talked about fiscal policy? We have the cut income tax as well. Isn't this under fiscal policy? Okay, so therefore that depends on the intention. If today government reduce the taxes is for the sake to increase total demand, that is called fiscal policy. If the intention is to influence the total supply in the economy, like for example, cutting the taxes to encourage the firms to produce more, for example, that is called supply side policy. So you can see that it can be two ways. Okay, so all this here on the left is more on market forces. That means it does not involve much of the government intervention, but we rely more on the market forces, okay, to influence the total supply in the economy. On the other hand, we have interventionist approach. Interventionist approach means that includes the government interventions in that market or in that industry to influence the productivity, to influence the efficiency, and to influence the output level. Okay, so interventionist approach means we include the government intervention. Okay, so there is an active role, okay, of the government. Like for example, government provides certain resources directly, certain financial assistance directly. Okay, training, government provides training and education. Okay, government provides grants, government provides financial assistance. Okay, all these are basically under interventionist approach. Okay. So you can see all the methods that I've listed over here are the instruments, the example of the market-oriented and interventionist approach. But we can summarize everything in a very simple way. Remember in the tutorial 1, right? We learned about there are a few ways to increase the long-run economic growth, right? Remember the mind map that we have drawn in the first tutorial? So I say, what are the two ways to achieve long-run economic growth? One is to increase the quantity of the resources. The other one is to increase the quality of resources. Remember that? You look into tutorial 1, there's a mind map for that. Okay, increase in the quantity of resources and increase in the quality of resources, right? Now, when you look into the increase in the quality of resources, what are the 3 ways for us to increase the quality of resources? Increase in what? Physical capital. And then human capital. One more, technological advancements. So very easy. You use back the same points because these are the points that will affect the potential output of the economy. So as long as you look into all these keywords, you know that it's part of the supply side policies. So I can summarize it over here. You can use back the determinants of the long run economic growth that you had learned in the first lesson. Okay. And categorize that into supply side policies because all these are going to influence the potential output in the economy. So therefore, that is also considered as supply side policies. Technological advancements, human capital through education and training, physical capital through the increase of machineries, capitals, and equipments, and also the rise in population, like having more workers, like what we say, increase in the quantity of resources. But remember, there's a risk for the increase in quantity of resources is that it could result in the diminishing marginal returns. If you still remember, we say that when you have more labor, when you learn in the first lesson, you learn about production function, right? So you learn about this is your real GDP, this is your quantity of your labor. Remember, we say that the graph will be like this, the production function. Why is that so? Because when you hire more and more workers, there could be some inefficiency that arise. So therefore, like for example here, when you move the points from point A to point B over here, yes, the output has increased when you have more workers, okay? But the increment is getting lesser, okay? Because of the inefficiency, okay? Because of the inefficiency that result in the diminishing marginal returns, okay? But anyway, all this will still result in the shift of the LAS curve. Okay, so let's illustrate it on the diagram. Okay, so how the graph looks like. Okay, so let's look into a simple illustration here. Let's look into supply side policy, how the graph looks like. So we have said that supply side policies will influence the total supply of the economy. So it will shift the LRAS curve because whatever shift the LRAS curve, it will shift the short run aggregate supply curve as well. So let's try to illustrate this, okay, in diagram. So first of all, you have y-axis, you have x-axis, same thing, origin, and then price level, okay? And this is your quantity of real GDP. Okay, and then as usual, you have your aggregate demand curve, you have your SAS curve, and you have your LAS curve as well. Okay, so this is your initial full employment at this price level of 100, for example. and we call it as point A. Okay. So now what we are going to show is that there will be shift in the SAS and LS curve. Okay. So for example, let's shift. Okay, so let's shift our SAS and LS curve. Okay, so LS curve shift rightwards. Okay. And then SAS curve shift rightward as well. Okay, so that's what you need to show here. The shift of SAS and LS. Let me just try to draw on the line itself. Hold on. Okay, so you shift SAS and LS here. Okay, so that's the first thing you must illustrate for supply side policy, the shift of LS curve and SAS curve. Okay, so now where's your new point? Your new point is actually here. Let me show it. Yeah, here. Okay, this is your point B. Okay, so that's the main thing that you must show for supply side. Okay, so this is your supply curve, demand curve. So intersection. Okay, now usually, for supply side policy, after the shift of LS curve and SAS curve, usually it will be associated with the rightward shift of AD curve as well. Why? Because for all these supply side policies, it will be associated with the rising of government spending, rising of consumption, rising of investment. So usually after the shift of LAS and SAS, usually it will be associated with the rightward shift of AD curve as well. So you can illustrate it together in this diagram as well. And the shift of AD curve is up to you. Whether you want to shift like this, let's say is by equal extent, okay? Let's say like this. Okay, now this red color line that you can see here. Now after my AD curve shift, where's my new equilibrium? The new supply curve is here, new demand curve is here. So the intersection will be here. Now, at point C over here, what can you realize? Okay, let me just label it. Just now, this is the new YF1. Okay. Now, at point C here, you can see the price level remain the same, but you have more outputs now. Okay. That's one possibility. Or you want to shift more also can. Let's say you want to shift more. Let's say when you draw an AD curve, in the end, it result like this. For example, let me just erase all this first. Let's say when you draw your AD curve, at the end it becomes like this. It shifts even more AD curve. So at the end, after you shift your AD curve, your point C is here, and you can see this time the price level is slightly higher and the output is also high. That is also correct. Okay, if you want to shift a little bit only, okay, let's say your AD curve is only shifting a bit to like this only. Let's say, for example, okay, here you can see that your point C is here, in which you can see that the price level has fallen down a bit, and then your output also increase. So just remember, when it comes to the graph drawing, the impacts, the outcomes, that depends highly on how you draw the diagram. Okay, so we all will get higher outputs in this context, but whether your price level will be higher or lower or the same, that depends on your graph. Okay, so at the end, as long as there's a shift of AD curve, that is correct already. So like for example, for this one, I prefer the first one, which is the equal shift. For example, the AD curve shift equally, okay, like this. So in the end, my point C is here, therefore the price about the same, and the output becomes higher. So this is what I illustrate. So at the end, in my final equilibrium here, the price level remains the same as the initial one, but we have more output now. Okay, so overall, what you can see here, there are three shifts of the graph: LAS, SAS, and aggregate demand curve. Okay, so three shifts of the graph. Okay, so these are things that you need to know. So let's have a look into tutorial questions. Okay, question 1, reduction of business taxes. Like what I say, if today the intention of reducing the business taxes is to encourage the firms to actually produce more, therefore we call it a supply side policy, and it's more on free market supply side policies, because we want to rely on the market forces to encourage firms to produce more, to be more efficient, to be more productive, instead of using government intervention. Okay, so therefore this is aimed to lower the tax burden on business. Okay, therefore incentivizing investment, entrepreneurship, and economic growth, because lower business taxes will encourage people to start up new businesses, to produce more outputs, to sell more, and that result in economic growth without much of government intervention. Okay. Second question, government subsidies for R&D. Subsidy is a form of financial assistance, a grants given by the government. Okay, so therefore that involves government intervention. So that involves the direct government intervention to incentivize innovation and technological advancements in the economy. Okay, so subsidy is a form of financial assistance, so that means that includes the intervention for R&D. Okay, this can help in terms of the technological advancements. Okay, for question 3, implementation of minimum wage law. So this involves the government intervention. So therefore we call it as interventionist approach. Okay, so because that includes the government intervention to establish a minimum wage level. Okay, so like for example, from government set a minimum wage of 1,005. So therefore that includes the intervention. So from now on, when you hire workers per month, you must pay 1,005 to solve the at least relative poverty or market inequalities. Now, question 4, imposition of tariff on imported goods. Again, imposition of tariff by government intervention by government. Okay, so therefore that's also called interventionist approach. So government impose tariff. Tariff means import tax. Okay, so to protect the domestic industry and to protect the domestic production. Okay, so the first question is just to identify whether it's a market approach or interventionist approach. Now, question number 2, which of the following will have an effect on technology or human capital or capital accumulation? Capital accumulation means that we talk about the accumulation of the machineries, equipments, and technology, and also indicate which curve will shift. First question 1, subsidy. Now this is tricky, Okay, first one, subsidy given to the paddy producers to encourage more of the rice production. For subsidies, okay, this one, it is the intention of subsidy is to reduce the costs and to increase the output. So when we talk about subsidy is to reduce the price of the inputs itself. Okay, so for this one, it only shift the SRAS curve rightwards, not RAS. Okay, so yes, it's still shifting the supply curve, but only SAS, not the LAS. So subsidies does not fit into the category of whether it will increase the human capital or physical capital or technological advancement. No. Okay, so for subsidy, it merely affects the price of inputs, the cost of the production. So it only shift the SRAS curve, not RAS. Okay. So if you talk about subsidy, whether it's a free market or interventionist approach, subsidy, it involves the government intervention. Okay, so it's an interventionist approach. Government giving the money, the financial assistance, the grants, the subsidies to the producers. Okay, question number 2. The government allocates 1.2 billion, okay, for free medical insurance. So first of all, we talk about free medical insurance and to increase the awareness of diabetes and its inherent dangers amongst the population. So free medical insurance, okay? So government allocate money for this. So again, this is like what we say as interventionist approach that includes the government intervention. Okay, so free medical insurance. So that means we concern about the health of the workers, okay, health of the people. So therefore, this will affect the human capital because you want your workforce, you want your workers to become healthy, okay. So therefore, this will contribute to the human capital, okay. This will contribute to the human capital accumulation by promoting better health outcomes. Okay, so what about the shift then? So first of all, when you talk about the shift, because it affects the human capital, right? So we know that it's going to shift the LAS curve, and whatever shift LAS will shift the SAS as well. Okay, and because that includes the government allocation of money, right? So these will have shift in aggregate demand. So that means that 3 of your graph will be shifted. Okay, so AD will shift right, LAS will shift right, and SAS will shift right as well. Okay, so 3 things here. Okay, next question. 5.5 billion allocated to extend all 4 land interstate highways into 6 lanes. So this is about extension of the infrastructure. So all this we call as infrastructure. So infrastructure, improvement in infrastructure under which category? Physical capital. Right, machineries, equipment, technology, infrastructure, all these under physical capital. So when the government allocate money to improve the infrastructure, that also improve the physical capital, and whatever shift the physical capital will shift LAS curve and the SAS curve. Now here also includes the government spending. Okay, so it will shift the aggregate demand curve as well. So what can you see here? 3 things: LAS shift rightwards, SAS shift rightwards, and AD curve shift rightwards. That is exactly in the outcomes that we have seen just now when we draw the diagram. The 3 graphs will be shifted. Okay, so this is something that you can draw in terms of outcomes for assignment as well. Okay, last question here. Question 3. Which of the points mentioned in the article below will have a long-run impact on aggregate supply? Use the AD and AS diagram to support your explanations. So same thing, this is just like how you do your assignments. Like when you come across the article, let's say you look into this article and your article is about budget. So in budget, you have ample of points for you to extract to determine which line to shift. Okay, so like for example, let's say you look into this article. Okay, now you are going to analyze this one with the use of ADS diagram. Okay, so you read lo, like here is a budget in 2013, a bit long ago already. Okay, so let's say here it says that Najib said that the budget is a gesture of appreciation to Malaysian and based on the background of the economy and that was poised to expand 4.5 to 5% for 2012, spurred by private investment. Okay, now speaking of private investment, for those of you who are still searching for articles, you can also search for one article that's about the China investment to Malaysia in previous year. Look for that. Yeah, so China's pumped in amount of investment into Malaysia in the previous year, and that helps in terms of technological advancements and physical capital. You have a lot of articles, a lot of news about that, so you can look into that as well. Okay, private investment. So very similar to this kind of article. Now here it says that he also announced the continuation of the One Malaysia People's Aid Dream, increase of 500 to household earning not more than 3,000 a month. Okay, something about the transfer payments here. Now then continue here. You can see some stars points here. First one, 38.7 billion to improve the quality of education in the country with an additional 500 million teachers in the core subject of English, Bahasa Malaysia, Science and Maths. The government will allocate 440 million to the Skills Development Fund Corporation to provide loans for trainees to undergo skills training. Now you see, when you look into the article, right, you have a lot of points for you to pick to analyze. If you are not familiar with the points, you're not sure of the outcome, then you do not pick that. You pick the points that you are very comfortable with. Like for example, maybe the first one, just now the dream one, is about government spending transfer payments, right? Or it can also affect the consumption because we give the household money, right? Let's say you're not certain, you're not sure whether it's correct or not. That's fine. Then you look into this one that I highlight green. So you talk about education, you see the word skills development, you see the word skills training, then you confirm that this is about supply side. Oh, okay. So therefore here you see this one later on. Okay, you need to explain. Of course, you might explain why it's as a supply side. Okay, so like for example, okay, I see the word education. Okay, I see the word training, and I see the term skills development funds. I need to apply all this into my writing. I must say that, you know, why I say this is supply side, why I draw the supply side policy in my assignment. Okay, so I can say that all this will contribute to human capital. Okay, improvement in human capital. So therefore, all these will influence the potential output in the economy, or what we call as the total output in the economy, the total supply, aggregate supply. So therefore, it will shift the LS curve and SAS curve rightwards. You must explain one by one. Use all the terms that I have told you just now when we do the recap. That will be helpful for you. And be more specific if you want to get more marks. Like for example, this one, is it market-oriented approach or interventionist approach? This one that you see. Interventionist, you write about that as well. So we say that this is government spending. So government spending here. So later they will shift in aggregate demand curve as well. Okay, so you see here, you already identify a lot of things already, and you sure that this is correct. You will never get it wrong. So choose all these things that you are confirmed. Okay, so later on you are going to shift this tree graph. And then you can talk more about the concept that you learn. You talk about increase in human capital, okay, and you show off a bit. All these are what we call as interventionist approach. Okay, that includes government intervention. So you must explain. Okay, you must explain. So I'm just saying that try to touch all the points that you learn, all the concepts that you learn. Okay, be specific in terms of your applications. Okay, so same thing. The next one, you can see that we have a total of 500 women will be trained as board members under the Women Directors Training. Again, it's something about training and education that improves human capital. Okay, SOCSO will allocate 200 million to enable its 1.4 million members to undertake free health screening. Even better, this is the same thing like insurance that we talked about just now. Okay, in government hospital or SOCSO's panel clinics to detect non-communicable diseases. So you know that all this will affect LAS, SAS, and aggregate demand curve for those that are highlighted. So you choose the points that you are very confident that you will never get it wrong. So you will definitely get full marks for your graph, like for diagram analysis. So what you can focus on is just the use of the concept itself, like what concept you want to use. Okay. So you can see I put up some writings here that you can mirror, not asking you to cut and paste, but mirror, like how to explain a bit. Okay, like for example, the first one we talk about the investment in education. Okay, the skills development, the women's training, okay, the women's director training, okay, and then the healthcare initiative. So you see how they explain, how they elaborate. Like for example, the women director training, they talk about how this can enhance their decision making and innovations. Okay, boosting the long run economic growth. Okay, and you can also talk about this is an interventionist approach. Okay, so at the end you can see that the outcome is there will be shift in LIS curve, there will be shift in SAS curve, and lastly there will be shift in AD curve. Try to elaborate a bit as well. Like you can see that we say there will be a shift in LIS curve is because that increase the potential outputs. Okay, all these contribute to the human capital. Okay, and also the SAS will shift. Okay, and at the end AD shift. Now, so when we talk about AD shift, right? Okay, the shift, it depends on how you draw the graph. Okay, you can draw the AD curve shift in the same proportion, or shift more than that, or shift less than that. But remember, at the end, you must specify your outcomes, whether your price level is higher or remain the same or lower, okay, and the output is higher. So remember, you must talk about the outcomes, the final outcomes of your diagram. Okay, so this one you refer to the graph that we drew just now in the recap. Okay, so these are things that you need to know for supply side policy. Next week lesson is Phillips curve, the inflation and unemployment. That one will be super duper important. Can be quite heavy next lesson. So next lesson, there will be more graph that you need to know. So stay tuned for the next week lesson.